Welcome, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy weekend to you. We are going to talk about the Gulf of Mexico and potential tropical trouble here over the next week or two. Who's going to see the heavy rain, where a storm or two may form. I'm also going to take a look at heat building into the Central and Eastern U.S. next week. Uncomfortably hot for many of us who have not yet really experienced that much heat this month. And we'll also take a look at some severe weather again over portions of the plains and winter weather late in the season across the Rockies. So thank you for joining me this morning. Here's a look at the areas we're watching in the Gulf of Mexico for potential tropical trouble. Still too soon to even make an exact forecast, but I've got a couple of areas highlighted and some time frames when we may have impacts. We've got the Central American gyre, which is over the Mexican continent or Mexican area, Central American continent, if you want to call it a continent. And that is going to drift northward and over warm waters of the Gulf, lowering amounts of wind shear. We are going to see likely a system forming somewhere in the southwestern Gulf. It is trending a little bit closer to South Texas than yesterday's runs. But Mexico still looks like the potential landfall target here. And much of that rain is going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, and into Thursday. But yes, the first name on the list is Alberto. I think this one's got at least a 50% chance of getting to that. Models are indicating, at least the GFS model has been showing for several days now, that a second system may try to form as we get towards next weekend, maybe farther to the north and east. But again, Texas and maybe Louisiana and Mississippi are going to be in the potential impact area for that. Whether or not we get named storms from one or two of these areas, we are going to see a very big increase in rainfall potential. And that's what I think you've got to be most concerned with on the Gulf Coast in the month of June. It's rain, not necessarily wind or surge or anything like that. We're just a little bit too early in the season for that. But with the waters being above average, ocean temperatures running very hot, record levels, obviously, if you're on the Gulf Coast, you need to be prepared for something that can intensify quickly, even in the month of June. We're getting a bit of a later start in the season than the last few years, but I want to compare us to 2005, which in my opinion was the worst season on record for the Gulf of Mexico, for especially Louisiana and upper Texas. But you saw the first storm formed around this time of the year. The second one didn't form till the end of June. And then when we got into early July, things very quickly got very active. No two seasons are going to be the same, but the season that we're in right now looks like it's kind of heading in that direction. So that's what we're going to look at. Right now in the Gulf of Mexico, we have a 50% chance of development. I'm going to refresh this because we may actually have I guess we don't yet have the 8 o'clock Eastern, but a pretty decent chance here with low pressure forming early next week in the Southwest Gulf that we will have a depression, at least a 50% chance. And I think those odds continue to climb as we get more into Monday and Tuesday of next week. We've been watching this Invest 90L. It is basically fading. Wind shear's been too strong, a little bit stronger than maybe we thought a couple days ago, but the damage has been done with this system across South Florida, where some places picked up over 20 inches of rain last week. We don't need a named system to produce heavy rain, and unfortunately, for those of us in South Florida, a lot of cleaning up to do from last week's rains. In the Pacific, right now, we're pretty quiet. We may not stay that way, but for the time being, we're pretty quiet. Here's a broader view of the tropics. This is our infrared satellite view Saturday morning. I'm going to circle some features for you guys here, but you can see what's left of our Invest here moving away and merging with this cold front. You can kind of see this front that's kind of draped just off the East Coast and then extends up to a thunderstorm complex here in the upper Midwest. We also have a developing gyre here, upper level high pressure system over southern Mexico, and a couple of flare-ups with it, one on the Pacific side, the other on the Caribbean side. But this gyre is expected to gradually shift northward, and right now we're in a sauna basically in the Western Gulf. It's been such a hot spring and summer. Water temperatures in this portion of the Gulf are between 2 and 4 degrees above the average, more common for April or for August than for early June. So the potential for a system to form is greater than you might expect in an average season. Farther off on the African wave train here, we are seeing flare-ups, but nothing at this point that looks like it's going to develop into anything too favorable at this point. After this massive trough lifts out to the north and east, we do have a bit of an upper level feature here in the central Atlantic that may try to sneak towards the Bahamas later next week. I do want to talk about that a little bit more for you guys because it could be something to keep an eye on the southeast coast here, but we've got a while for that to happen. In the Gulf of Mexico, right now we're not in terrible shape. We do see that moisture feed, though, continuing into southwest Florida. The upper level flow aloft is still from southwest to northeast, sending those clouds and that moisture across. The Florida Keys are a little bit wet this morning. Overall, rainfall totals less than they have been, but still kind of wet here if you're down in Monroe County and southern Dade County, Miami-Dade County here. But you can see at the lower levels, we actually have wind flow out of the southeast. You kind of see these little clouds in here going from east to west. So you've got low-level trade winds out of the east, upper-level winds still out of the southwest. The two, when they differ like that, indicate that there's still a decent amount of wind shear. However, as we get into early next week, this strong wind shear out of the southwest is expected to weaken, and trades will be more favorable for some tropical development. Right now it's quiet, but shouldn't last that way for much longer. In the Caribbean, if you're in the eastern half of Cuba over to the Greater Antilles, you are hot and you are dry. We are keeping an eye, though, on the Western Caribbean. You can kind of see a bit of a spin up here off the coast of Costa Rica. This is potentially our system to watch here as we head into next weekend, but we've got a ways to go. But all this moisture here in the Southwest Caribbean is expected to build northward. And again, we're going to see a surge in moisture in Jamaica, Cuba, and South Florida. It's been kind of dry for this portion of the Caribbean, not for Florida. But as we get into the second half of this upcoming week, it should get wetter again across this area. So I know you're asking for rain in Jamaica, for Haiti. You don't want a lot of rain, but you want some to break the heat up. We are going to see some better chances for that to form here over the coming days of the upcoming week. And finally, in the Western Atlantic, we do see Invest 90L. There's such a weak circulation here. The pressure has not dropped, and all the thunderstorms are displaced off to the north and east. It's going to get wet in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland here, but nothing should develop tropically. Here's Bermuda. You're going to see some rainy weather this weekend as well, but you can see things are quickly quieting down over the east coast of the U.S. So a pretty good weekend to hit the beaches up here, although we will have some rip currents on the east coast this weekend. In the central Atlantic, we're keeping an eye on this little flare up in here. Right now, nothing expected to develop, but the European model, I'll show you that in a little bit, shows that this may try to survive and head towards the Bahamas next week. I don't think the chances for development are super good, but I think it's worth tracking at this point. And then multiple waves of storms coming off of Africa. As you can see, they're not surviving very long. That could start to change in a couple of weeks when we get into a more favorable upper level pattern. On the Pacific side, pretty quiet. We have thunderstorms over southern parts of Mexico. We do have to keep an eye on these as they get into this area. Every time something looks like it's tried to form, it just hasn't happened yet this season in the Pacific. So the trend is our friend when it comes to that. This is the upper level pattern, 200 millibars, about 35,000 feet up. This is where planes fly. You can see these darker colors, these blues and greens, indicate high amounts of wind flow up there, a stronger jet stream. And when those are high, we get higher amounts of wind shear and less favorable conditions for storms to develop. What happens is the storms grow and then everything gets sheared off, in this case, to the east. Now, as we head into next week, you can see this is Monday and Tuesday. Generally speaking, there is high wind shear coming in from the north over Florida and the Western Caribbean, but low wind shear around Central America and especially Mexico and the Western Gulf. As we head into the second part of next week, that wind shear continues to be low closer to Texas. So favorable conditions for something in the Western Gulf as it heads towards Texas. The Eastern Gulf, though, next week, not favorable for development. We've got a strong trough here and very fast wind flow. So if you are flying south into Florida here on Wednesday, you're going to probably have a faster flight than usual due to the strong flow out of the north. That is going to push westward and weaken, though. And again, the second part of next week, we have some more favorable conditions for potential development as the wind flow aloft does weaken significantly next weekend across much of the Gulf. The exception, of course, being across Florida here. So the European says, hey, we've got a couple of opportunities for something to pop up. Here's the first one, a pretty decent chance. Let me move this southward a little bit. 70 to 80% chance of tropical development here Tuesday into early, or actually late Monday night into Tuesday. And then this is Wednesday across the Western Gulf. And then Thursday, if there is something, it's likely headed onshore. And small chance it's South Texas, better chance it's northeastern Mexico. We are keeping an eye on this little feature here as it heads towards the Bahamas and Florida here Thursday and Friday. It may jump up our moisture across northern Florida and across Georgia and South Carolina. The odds of something actually developing, though, are not very good. I don't want to try to spin something up over something very minimal at this point, but we may see a bump up in moisture here. This is a bit of a shift from what forecasts have shown over the last couple of days. And then as we get into next weekend, we may try to see some genesis of another tropical system in the Western Gulf. The European doesn't agree with the GFS, which I'll show you, but it does show maybe a second piece in the Western Gulf. So definitely a few features that we're going to be watching here over the next several days. Here is a look at the ensembles. I'm just going to show you guys surface pressure. And as we head into the Western Gulf on Tuesday, we do have several potential locations for a low pressure to form here. Generally speaking, in the southwestern Gulf, a couple of outliers in the northwestern Gulf. Generally speaking, pressure is not super high. Pressures are averaging about 1,000 millibars. That would maybe be a low-end tropical storm. The lower those numbers go, below 1,000, the stronger our potential system. But as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, you can see everything is moving northwest towards Mexico. A couple of solutions, though, favoring South Texas, but nothing super strong at this point. You will see the pressures are starting to lower here near the Bahamas as well on Thursday, according to the European. This is nothing super strong at this point. We're talking 1,010, so very weak low pressure, kind of like what we just saw come off of Florida the other day. But generally speaking, that heads northwest. It avoids South Florida, but we have a few potential cyclone locations here for something very weak heading to the upper Florida coast and maybe all the way up to the Carolinas. This is Thursday evening around 8 o'clock Eastern. This is Thursday night. This is Friday morning, and then our chances fade after that. So a very small window for something. And the pressures stay very high. So again, nothing of super concern at this point. Now we're watching the Western Gulf again here next weekend. This is about a week from today, and we're seeing on the European not a lot of support, but some support for something to try to pop up in the Western Gulf. A few more solutions taking it more towards the Central Gulf. Everything else keeps it buried down towards Mexico. The GFS disagrees with that a little bit, not surprisingly. It agrees that we're going to have something that tries to come up into the Western Gulf, a few more solutions closer to the Texas coastal bend, but the GFS not showing anything heading towards the Bahamas. It has a few low pressure, but very high low pressure systems, meaning very weak low pressure systems towards Bermuda here on Thursday and Friday, but not showing the threat towards the Bahamas. Instead, it's picking up on potential development here near the Yucatan Peninsula. This is next Friday evening. And then this is next Saturday morning, a week from today. And a lot of spread, but generally speaking, a lot more support than what the European is showing for development in the Western Gulf. As we move this forward to Sunday of next week, we see several solutions, again, taking aim at Texas, but a few aim towards the Central Gulf Coast. Nothing towards Florida, by the way. I know the GFS operational tried to show a few runs taking something into Florida, but I think high pressure aloft is too strong for that to happen. It would have to go farther west into the Gulf. And then this is Monday and Tuesday. So again, we're going to be watching the Gulf for some time here. The operational European brings an increase in moisture up into Louisiana on Monday. It also dries out Florida from the north and east. You see this big area of high pressure in here. So if I draw on the map here, you can see a little bit of lowering pressure here, but more of a moisture feed up into Louisiana and eventually upper Texas. This is next Monday morning, the 17th. We also see these brown colors indicating some drying in the atmosphere getting down into central Florida. There's a little bit of a ribbon here in South Florida we need to watch, but the flow is out of the east. Last week, it was out of the southwest, which pulled all the moisture from the Gulf into Florida. As we head into early next week, there's drying coming in. So this typically would mean a quieter period for Florida until we get to the Panhandle and into the Central Gulf where this moisture is coming your direction. As we move this along here into the middle of next week, we see this moisture feed heading more towards Texas, and things are going to get wetter by Tuesday and Wednesday in Texas, and they should dry out more across the Panhandle of Florida all the way into Louisiana by Wednesday of next week. The European does show a very weak surface trough, maybe an area of low pressure here just north of Abaco and Grand Bahama. Generally speaking, it's kind of heading in this direction, but it's weak. There's not the kind of moisture that we're seeing here in Texas on Thursday. Much different look. So keep an eye on this little feature, but I don't think it's going to do a whole lot at this point. As we head into next weekend, you see the European reloads and brings more moisture up into Texas and Louisiana, but not really developing anything tropically, just bringing moisture in that direction. Here's the Canadian model, a little bit different than the European. A big area of moisture heading up. I think this is probably overdone, but does have a depression or storm heading very close to Matamoros, Mexico, with landfall late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. Then second feature forming and moving up towards Texas. This has it just south and west of Galveston here next Saturday night, early Sunday morning. So it's showing both threats here, then showing a little bit quieter weather after that, but moisture across the Caribbean as we get to the end of the month of June. And the GFS model is definitely an outlier compared to the others. It doesn't really develop a surface low, but it does show something trying to break off into, say, Corpus Christi, Texas here. You can see there's kind of this weakness here, kind of a weak circulation and a second piece. So it's struggling to resolve what may pop up here. It's got just, multiple weak low pressure systems versus the Canadian, which showed something in here, and the Euro, which showed something in here. So again, doesn't agree. Not a surprise to me. I've been in this business for a while, and I've never seen that agreement. But it does show that moisture heading in. As we head towards next weekend, you can see it's taking low pressure and spinning it up. And there is definitely some potential for something here, but look how it's just got multiple systems here trying to form. You can kind of see these multiple centers here. Again, struggling to resolve things. The GFS has some struggles with that, but there is a potential we could see some sort of a weaker system in here. I think it's a lot less likely to go this direction than it would in this direction, but we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on the Gulf of Mexico behind this first system here. All right, let's move on. Taking a look at rain, this is a blend of all the models, and we're still going to have some wetness across Florida. It isn't going to be anything like last week, but still some places over the next 10 days could see significant rain, especially as we get towards next weekend and beyond. Our rain totals, averaging amount, will be generally on the order of 3 to 6 inches. Northern Florida is getting a little bit wetter, but we're still not seeing that much relief from the drought just yet, certainly compared to what Southwest Florida sees. But you'll see that the rest of June can still be pretty wet in parts of Florida. Looking at the Central Gulf region, we're going to see things getting wet here starting Sunday night and Monday. And next week, the potential to see 6 to 10 inches of rain across Louisiana and Mississippi. Slightly less over Florida and Alabama, but potentially 6 to 10 inches of rain in some of those Gulf Coast communities. So about to get very wet here in Louisiana and Mississippi, and certainly Texas as well. Take a look here at the upper Texas coast. We return to the heavy rain threat after a brief break in the rainy period we've had, but potentially 6 to 10 inches of rain here for southeastern Texas. And finally, looking at deep South Texas, we see more of the same here. It's going to get pretty wet, and the average models, or the model average showing about 6, 7 inches South Padre, 8 inches Corpus Christi, and close to 10 inches in Galveston. We still have heat in the southwest. We've got a winter weather threat in the northwest as things get much colder. Interesting to see this red flag warning here in central Cal and then a freeze watch in northern Cal, but we are seeing just one last really big system come through here that's going to cool things off. The east is going to heat up. We have a heat advisory here for the Twin Cities. We're also going to have severe weather up there. The upper level pattern shows that. You've got this big trough moving into the northwest, sending colder air down in this direction. We've got a remnant circulation here moving through Omaha, another one that's going to follow it and may trigger some more severe weather as we get to tonight. Drying out across the east, you see this northwesterly flow that is going to favor a pretty quiet weekend for us here in the northeast, but active weather expected across this portion of the country for the next several days. Here's a look at the European upper level pattern, and you can see big trough in the west, disturbance moving through the upper Midwest here this weekend, and then fading as it gets into southeast Canada. But keep an eye on things in Quebec and Ontario over the next couple of days. Next system crashes the west here. That breaks up the heat. It brings winter weather to the mountains, and it will probably bring some severe weather to the plains and to the upper Mississippi Valley here Tuesday, Wednesday, possibly even into Thursday as we get up into parts of eastern Canada, especially up here in Quebec and northern Ontario. Big ridge of high pressure builds in to the northeast. We're going to see crazy heat here for the second half of next week. The humidity comes up as well. And On the end of that heat wave, heading into next weekend, you can see the ridge shifts south and west. The wind flow picks up. We will probably have to deal with some severe weather in about a week across the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. But for today, two areas to watch. One around Omaha, where the College World Series is being played. There's a tornado threat. And then later on as well across the prairies of Montana and the Dakotas. Tornado threat in both areas. Greatest, though, across eastern Nebraska and western Iowa tonight. Big wind and hail threat, especially across North Dakota and eastern Montana, and stretching up into Saskatchewan and Manitoba as well, Westman mainly. Tomorrow, that threat for severe weather is going to be primarily at night around the Twin Cities. I do think this needs to be shifted northward tomorrow into the Arrowhead region. I'll show you why in a second. Mainly hail, but severe wind as well. And then Monday and Tuesday, both areas are under the gun. So this is the time of year in northern Minnesota and North Dakota where we typically have severe weather, and I think we're going to see several rounds of that. Here's a quick look at the forecasted model for where our rain and storms may be. You will see it this evening across Nebraska and Iowa, and then as well across the Dakotas. We're going to see more across Minnesota here tomorrow evening. Take a look at northeastern Minnesota. And then another outbreak late at night tomorrow night into the day on Monday across the Dakotas and Minnesota. Let me move this along more quickly for you guys here. You can always pause and take a look at it. This is just one model, but keep an eye on eastern Nebraska here and northeast Kansas and southeastern South Dakota. Time frame 5 to 7 o'clock. That moves into Iowa. We may see another round of storms after that, and then quieter weather expected for tomorrow. Here's a look at Iowa, which has had just an extremely active spring. We are going to, again, some of the same areas that have been hit hard are going to be under the gun here early tonight, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, and maybe into Des Moines, 9 or 10 o'clock, and then that lifts out overnight. A second wave could hit Iowa as well overnight tonight. So if you are watching from Iowa, southern Minnesota, please make sure you've got a way of receiving alerts tonight as some of this weather could hit during the overnight hours. Tomorrow should be quieter, so we do have some good news there. Minnesota, I'll move through pretty quickly. We're going to have some rain in the Twin Cities. Then it gets super hot here tomorrow after the storms move away to the north and east, and that will set us up for an arcing storm complex, which could move all the way through the Arrowhead into the Superior region here tomorrow afternoon and eventually tomorrow night into Wisconsin. And then more rain and storms as we head into early in the day on Monday. It may start early in the day. We may start to see an increase in some flash flooding as well, as some places in here could pick up over 3 inches of rain. In the Northwest, big system crashes. Look at some of the snow here for Monday into Monday night. Yellowstone included in that. Snow totals here will start climbing in the Cascades tomorrow, even tonight really, but tomorrow especially, and then especially into Monday and early Tuesday, where we have the potential in the higher elevations to see over a foot of new snow falling. It's probably not going to last too long, but when it falls, it'll be heavy. Here's a look at the heat, though, in the Central U.S., and you'll see it gets hotter tomorrow. Record highs potentially around Little Rock, 97 degrees. 98 in St. Louis will be close to record highs. 97 in Chicago Monday, 96 in Southwest Michigan. It stays hot Tuesday, but that heat focuses a little farther to the east of you. Staying hot Wednesday, but here comes the cold front. It doesn't make it too much farther than Nebraska and Iowa, but it will cool things down a little bit around Chicago. The Northeast, on the other hand, does not see that. We have great weather today and tomorrow. Then it starts getting warm on Monday, and west of the Appalachians getting very hot. 96 in Pittsburgh, 94 in Morgantown, 92 in Hazard, Kentucky. And then take a look at Tuesday. We're looking at close to triple-digit heat around Wheeling and Parkersburg and Athens, Ohio. Huntingdon, 98 degrees. The Northeast starts sizzling as well as we climb into the mid and upper 90s. But it doesn't stop there. Wednesday's even hotter across the area. It gets more humid. Thursday's even hotter. In some areas here in New England, 100 degrees in New Hampshire on Thursday, Manchester, Nashua, and Concord. And then as we get to Friday, it's still pretty toasty, but we do start to cool down just a hair as we will start to see rain chances increasing across Maine. But we may see record highs for 3 straight days here next week in parts of the Northeast. Thank you all so much for your time today. Please like this video. Please consider becoming a subscriber if you haven't yet. And as always, I thank you for your time. You guys are very important to me as I continue to grow and help other folks. And as always, I credit all of that to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I give God all the glory every day. Every day is a blessing, No matter what we're dealing with, we have to understand that when we wake up, that is a day that was never guaranteed, but is a blessing and a gift from God. Psalm 118:24, this is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. And it's very easy to be down, just down and depressed and upset, angry, frustrated with things that aren't going great in your life. But I like to choose the optimistic view and say, look, nothing has been guaranteed, but the fact that we're here, we're sitting down, maybe you've got a cup of coffee and you're on YouTube, no matter how you feel, you've been given a day, and that is a reason to celebrate. That's a reason to rejoice. That's a reason to be glad, to just look at the bright side of everything and realize that our days are numbered here on earth. We're not going to have very many more. I celebrated my 42nd birthday last month, and I realize I'm probably past the 50% point. I don't know, but there's no guarantee. But there's fewer days now than there were yesterday and the day before and the day before that. But because God so loved the world and he gave his son Jesus to us to die, to sacrifice his life for us so that we could, in response, gain eternal life in heaven, be washed from our sins, and to live eternally in life. While our days here are numbered, our days in heaven are eternal and infinite. And that is the joy that I want to consider. I want you to consider having if you haven't already made that choice. I'm going to learn to speak, I promise. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. We'll catch up soon. And as always, God bless you.